Chelsea have qualified for the Champions League. Remarkable, just so relieved to be able to say those words. The stress of today was really intense, I have to say. I'm sure for many of you watching on, in terms of not just watching Chelsea in what was predictably a very tight game away from home that had huge stakes, huge repercussions for it, but also, of course, analysing and refreshing the scores elsewhere. I don't think this day, in terms of a scenario for Chelsea, could have gone much better. When you think about Chelsea winning themselves and the performance they put in, especially defensively in that second half. But then also, of course, the unexpected shock of Everton beating Newcastle at St James's Park, and as well Man United doing us a massive favour by beating Aston Villa 2-0, which then leaves Chelsea by the end there with the margin for error went from thin, you couldn't see it basically in terms of how stressful it was at kickoff, to quite wide when we were in that added time, and Chelsea were getting a lot of blocks in to prevent Forest getting the equaliser. But I don't want the permutations and what happened elsewhere to take away from the actual performance of Chelsea on the day, because of course I'm sure maybe players have some inkling of what's going on, but the performance of Chelsea was immense defensively. To a man, I just thought all round, especially in the second half, but even in the first half, I was quite staggered when I had a brief look at Twitter how negative everyone was. And I understood from an attacking point of view, Chelsea had only had one shot, or one chance that you could really look at. But we knew this was going to be a final, and I think that Enzo Maresca approached it as a final, and it's one of the things that he has really excelled at in the closing weeks of this season is Chelsea's not only ability to keep things tight, but especially when they go 1-0 up and have to hold on to a lead, being able to see out a game, which is things that Chelsea have been unable to do. I said pre-game, and I've said this elsewhere, like it's a bit like the Liverpool game, right? Like pre-walking into it, there wasn't much evidence to say Chelsea would win today, based on our horrendous away record, based on, Forest's ability defensively. But you had to rely on and hope that the big wins that had propelled us forward, that had given us a lot of hope and ambition and positivity, the likes of the Liverpool performance, the turnaround at Fulham that now feels that right boot of Tyreek George, and of course the turn and volley from Pedro Neto feels so defining and such like a massive turning point in Chelsea's season, and arguably in Chelsea's current era under the Clear Lake Bowley ownership, because this is headline. This is the biggest win so far in this era of Chelsea. And I wrote about this on my Substack. We've spoken about this all season. The dividing line between what we would account as success or failure was getting back into the Champions League. It was so essential for the club to feel like it was going in an upwards trajectory. The momentum, the fact that you've invested so much on this squad, there needs to be some form of a return, and part of that is getting back into Europe's elite competition for the players, for the head coach, for the club to feel like you're moving in a serious direction and competitive direction again. What that now opens up in terms of the summer transfer window, which is still, it opens a door, it opens a possibility. I saw both Winstanley and Stewart on that pitch. They are going to be defining now. A lot of attention is going to turn on to them post Wednesday in terms of whether they're going to be capable of doing the complete opposite to what they have shown so far in terms of constructing a squad, because there is a lot of talent there. And I think the way that team rallied and, came together, even players that many of us had don't really see as a major part of Chelsea's future, even putting in some key blocks late on, namely, of all people, Kieran Dewsbury-Hall with quite an incredible block late on. This should hopefully feel like a massive moment. We've had a few in recent weeks, and that's great because for a long period of time, we haven't had those. And that is something, to really, I hope, really use and cultivate that and try and grow that over the summer. The game itself, looking back at the starting lineup, I was proven wrong. I was a bit doubtful and a little bit concerned why Romeo Lavia wasn't starting the game. I sort of expressed pre-game how much I sort of felt like Lavia kind of had to start this game logically because he can't play on Wednesday in Roquelaure, and seeing Lavia, Caicedo and Enzo even in central midfield, you've got Reece at right back, and seeing whether Maresca would do that. He didn't do that. And arguably, Lavia came on post the first goal. So it's kind of hard to look back and go, well, would Chelsea have radically looked different if he started the game? We know the impact that Romeo Lavia has from a creative point of view of, very much from a deep position, building Chelsea's play up. That was my big concern. But in terms of Caicedo, Enzo, and the base of Chelsea's team, the first half was predictably tense, predictably cagey. There were two big chances in that first half. It was slim margins today. It really was. It did feel like a cup final, as I'm sure Wednesday will be against Betis. And that's why I think I give a lot of credit to Enzo Maresca here. You've got the Chris Wood chance and the Pedro Neto chance. Quite similar in the sense that, both players, it's a cross into the box, and just in terms of technique, they get it all wrong. You have to say, though, if you're a Forest fan and looking at Forest's, attack this season, Chris Wood had a lot of opportunities today that you felt like he would have at least taken one of them, and that was to Chelsea's kind of benefit that his shooting boots went awry. This is a guy who scored over 20 Premier League goals this season. Pedro Neto skying that chance is really frustrating, but he's not our natural centre forward. He's not a clinical striker in front of goal or a clinical goal getter for Chelsea. But there was very little to split the teams. Forest hadn't really come out of their shell. It looked like maybe they were waiting to see what maybe would happen elsewhere that then would force their hand to be a bit more proactive. And Chelsea, whilst not showing a lot offensively, I thought, the structure of the team was good enough that it didn't feel like we were being overrun. And whenever a set piece went into the box, whenever Forest tried to go direct, I thought the team and defensively, Tosin Allarabara, Reece James, Levi Colwill, Marc Cucurella, I thought even Rob Sanchez was very commanding whenever a ball went inside his 6-yard box, which is something that we haven't always seen this season. And at half-time, 50-50, but we had found out the turning point at Villa was, of course, Emi Martinez being sent off, which then gives you hope that maybe there's going to be a great scenario opening up here where suddenly we don't have to worry about Villa leapfrogging us. But Chelsea took firm hold at the start of the second half. I thought Chelsea's start to the second half was wonderful. It felt like Chelsea had kind of clicked into gear a bit more and wanted to look for that goal, go for it. I don't know if it was a strategy to wait for that kind of later period to try and go for it, but the way we started the second half was just on the front foot. It felt like a lot of our attacking players in the first half were quite anonymous, but I thought the way we pressed Forest back into their own half, eventually winning a corner. It's a really scrappy goal. It's probably the most scrappy goal Chelsea have scored all season, but listen, at this stage of the season, who cares? A ball gets played back into the 6-yard box. Neto scuffs it across the goal line, basically, and across the face of the goal. And there is Levi Colwill, who I have to say I was a little bit worried. Is he going to miss the ball? Is he going to have his feet prepared to maybe capitalise on this? But he calmly puts the ball in the back of the net. And the scenes in that away end were just miraculous to see. And Chelsea 1-0 up. And really, at that stage, we kind of knew that elsewhere results were starting to go in our favour. So it kind of felt a little bit like 2-0. That doesn't, lessen the tension of the game. But, Levi, I guess it's difficult. Do we go player by player here? But I think just to speak about Levi, obviously for him, such a huge goal not only in Chelsea's season, in Chelsea's recent past, arguably one of our biggest goals for years. But, for Levi, who's obviously come through the club's academy, and has been through a bit of a rough ride this season. As someone who played a lot of football last year and was hyped up by people like me and others who were so enamoured and were so positive and excited about what we saw from him developing through the academy, going on loan to Huddersfield, going on loan to Brighton, and wanting to see him, very much flourish in the first team. And, it's taken him a while to mature, but he is a centre-back and he is a very young centre-back still. And, of course, it is a position that requires that experience, that know-how, that kind of maturity. And that only comes from playing games. That only comes from learning from setbacks. And he's had to go through a lot of those this year. But I felt just defensively in the last few weeks of the season, I think it's a combination of, I think Tosin very much maturing and getting a lot better in his own individual performances. And also Trev Chalobah, I think has been a really good partner for him as well. I don't know if it's that chemistry there that's worked better for him than earlier in the season. But Levi on his own, I thought defensively, especially against Chris Wood, one of the things I criticised about Levi is I just didn't think he had a great, physical kind of side to his game. We know his ability in passing. We know his ability as more of a progressive-minded defender, and you don't want to take that away from him. But the dirty side of the game, the bread and butter of being a centre back in the Premier League, and I think he's absolutely not only on today's showing against Chris Wood, who is a very physically imposing imposing centre forward, but just generally in the closing run of the season, he's been immense. And for him to score, very unlikely goal scorer, but for him to step up there and you could see what it meant to him, not only in that moment, but obviously at full time, huge. And it very much cements him as a key part of this defence. Because I think for a lot of us, it's kind of hard to know what that defensive duo is going to look like come the start of next season. But I think what we can say with some assurance, I would say at this point, is I think Levi will be one of the two. I think Levi is the left centre-back for a long period of time, and this will kind of cement him there as kind of a big player in Chelsea's recent past, and hopefully can only excel when playing in the Champions League, which of course is a big moment for a lot of these young players to get that experience playing for Chelsea next season. And I felt this, to simplify it, it did feel like a cup final. It felt like watching the Europa League final, Chelsea going 1-0 up and then just shutting down the game. If I look at some of the subs, Romeo Lavia comes on in the 62nd minute, Malo Gusto comes on in the 78th minute, and Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall comes on in the 86th minute. So from an attacking point of view, Chelsea effectively made it pretty clear. Maresca made it clear. We're just holding on to our lead here and we're shutting the game down. We're playing for fouls. We're running the clock down. We're frustrating you. It just, we went to a 5-4-1 quite late in the game. And that was brilliant. Because one of the things, and I guess maybe this is the time to talk about Enzo Maresca, I guess we'll talk about him a little bit later as well, is that a lot of the criticism I've had and others is his lack of adaptability, of being rigid and kind of dogmatic about a style of play. No matter what the circumstance, no matter what the opponent is doing, no matter what you have to do to get over the line in a certain environment. But I think undeniably, especially in the closing run of this season, when you look at the Spurs game at home, the Liverpool game, the Man United game last week, and there are probably other examples people will pick out, but especially this game, he has adapted. Chelsea played in some ways very classic throwback Chelsea away from home, annoy the opposition, be physically imposing, win your 50-50s, close down space, look to capitalise on the opposition's mistakes. And that was kind of the game I hope Chelsea would get into eventually if they went 1-0 up, because not only I think has Maresca's team shown an ability to shut down a game, but Forest don't want to have the ball. They don't want to be the commanding presence, trying to dictate play, trying to open up. That's not their style. That's not the way they've been constructed all season. So you saw that desperation start to come in because they're not a naturally creative team. They have thrived and they have over-excelled. There's no deny about that. I think Nuno Espirito Santo has done an incredible job. And for them, it's still an amazing season, getting some form of European football. But that's not their natural tendency. So I think Chelsea were able to add the benefit of being comfortable in that shape on their own, winning many blocks, physically knowing that, and mentally knowing they can hold on to this lead. But then also, I think the opponent very much not wanting to be in that scenario and getting more desperate the longer the game went on. And, Chelsea, there were some key blocks late on. I thought Sanchez, again, commanding, someone who's faced a lot of criticism from nearly all of us this season. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, a guy who I didn't think was an essential signing, but he made a massive block late on, very late in this game. And of course, by the time we reached 95, 96 minutes, we knew that Newcastle had lost at home to Everton. We knew that Man United had beaten Aston Villa 2-0. So we effectively knew Champions League football was going to be coming back to Stamford Bridge. But the celebrations at full time were incredible. And I just think, it's obviously a validation of Enzo Maresca. When he got appointed nearly 12 months ago now, I was very critical of the appointment. I was a bit baffled by it. And listen, I'll make this clear. I'll keep on making this clear to the day I stop doing this show. I do not care about being right and having my narrative or my opinion be validated if it means Chelsea fail. I would always, always, always prefer to be wrong about my cynicism, about my criticism, about my doubts, if it means Chelsea win. And, today I think Enzo Maresca has got a massive win under his belt. He got one a few weeks ago against Liverpool, which I think was big. I know in retrospective it's very easy to go back because between then we obviously lost to Newcastle, which felt like a damaging defeat at the time. So it's always easy to narratively go back and think that the Fulham game, which I do think was a turning point undeniably, but also the Liverpool game, managing to get over the line against Man United when it looked like it could have been a bad evening for Chelsea last week at the Bridge. Maresca has got over the line. I said it's Champions League football. That will be defining for this season. And I just think if post-game people are going online to throw shots either way, that they were right all along or they're still right, or, I'm not going to give Maresca any credit, I kind of just roll my eyes. I just think it's so toxic and just stupid because I'm pretty sure most people, I see it in my comments, most people who watch this show, listen to this show, and most people I interact with love Chelsea and want to see Chelsea do well. And when you have days like today when it feels like a massive explosion of kind of relief and joy, you savour those moments and you don't care about the opinions you've had during the season because Chelsea have won and Chelsea have got back in the Champions League. This is not, I hope this is just a starting point for Chelsea in this era. This is not, the be-all and end-all, and this is as high as it's going to go. But undeniably, it's a significant win, and that means that Enzo Maresca deserves credit for Chelsea getting over the line. If Chelsea had not got over the line, then we're obviously having a very different conversation. But the fact that we have, I just think it's dishonest to try and act like Maresca deserves no credit and he has no part to play in any of this. If you were criticising Maresca, as many of us were, for Chelsea's failings, then surely the logic is that you'd praise him in a similar way and kind of similar sort of weight to it if we're doing well. And that's why I always try and express on this show is just honesty, right? When things aren't going well, I'm going to say it. And when things are going well and I think people deserve praise, I will always give them praise. And it's just relief after, a lot of disappointment, a lot of promises, a lot of false dawns, a lot of how great is this project without any kind of tangible sign of it being serious at all. When you actually have one now, Chelsea have got back in the Champions League. And of course, the excitement is what for the group this means. And of course, it's easy to forget there is a game on Wednesday that's quite important that I think is huge for this young group as well. I think for this young group to seal this season with a trophy, I think even if it is the trophy that Chelsea kind of have to win based on their kind of strength in the competition, but still, it would feel like, I think, a significant moment for them to hold that trophy and for the fans to celebrate a trophy for the first time since 2022. So all of that is relevant. I think just looking around the team and for some other players, I've given credit to Rob Sanchez. I thought, for a guy who has kind of been the butt of many jokes this season, and I think has been a flawed player in Chelsea's team. I still think Chelsea need to improve on goalkeeper because although today's game was fine margins and felt like a final and was going to define things, we still can look back over the course of the season and dissect and deep dive what went right, what went wrong. I think Sanchez is still a keeper that I think has flaws within him, but in a run of games that was important, he stepped up, and that was obviously great for Chelsea when they most needed it. I sort of look at Tosin Adarabioyo, a player who, I think at times, I think for a lot of the season hasn't looked like a major upgrade or looked like a player that's majorly made a difference. But I think tactically, Maresca has kind of got the best out of him and has identified games where his skill set as more of a physically imposing, commanding centre-back. I mean, that was one of the things defensively this time last year we were concerned about, was we didn't have enough physically imposing centre-backs, especially at set pieces. And if you look at the last few weeks when Tosin has been used sparingly, he's been very dominant in that aspect. So that is a tool in Maresca's skill set and kind of his squad that he's, I think, used to the best of his ability. And also for Tosin, kind of being the oldest player in this very young squad, has obviously become very popular in the dressing room and put in another big performance today for Chelsea. I've said this consistently. I think Caicedo and Cucurella, I think they deserve Champions League football. I think their performances this year for Chelsea have been immense. I think those are the two players. I said this from a long time ago now. I said if Chelsea go over the line in the Champions League race, I think I'll be looking at these two players as kind of key ingredients as to why it happened. And I think, again, you saw today, not as big starring performances, but Caicedo, the ground he's covered, it's more of the quiet stuff they do that I think is so essential. Cucurella more so in terms of the limelight because he scored a lot of goals, but today it was more of that kind of winning your duels, making intelligent runs, making intelligent interceptions, winning fouls when you need to. I think both of these players have excelled in that. Obviously Caicedo has been head and shoulders the best player, but I think Cucurella had a brilliant defensive performance to get today against Nottingham Forest, which was hostile ground, and I think he stepped up and is someone that you can rely upon now, which is a far cry from where we were. And obviously Caicedo has been the star this season, and rightly so, and has gained so much credit and flowers, and I hope maybe he gets more outside of Chelsea, because I think many people now, like in the Chelsea bubble, I think you find it very difficult to kind of find people who maybe don't quite appreciate Caicedo. I think most of us understand how important he's been for this team. I think the hope will be if we buy better players in the summer, he will be part of an even better team, which will then hopefully not only improve Chelsea in other areas of the pitch, but will gain him more acclaim as well, which we just know is natural. I thought Noni had some good runs today. I thought Neto too. Again, it's a weird game. It's a fine margins game, and when you're just sort of so obsessed about the result, I'm not going to really dissect this performance and get all aggy about how, from an attacking point of view, it wasn't that fluid, because needs must. We win 1-0, we get that first goal, and then I think you're well within your rights in that scenario, in this playoff high stakes. If it goes wrong, your season might be a failure sort of scenario. I don't blame Chelsea from a strategic point of view sitting deep and asking Forest to break them down. I think it's something that, you know, many Chelsea fans will recognise today watching that performance in an old Chelsea team. Sure, Forest aren't the might of Europe, they aren't Liverpool, but it has been an awkward ground for many teams to go to. And if you would have said 2 months ago, Chelsea, especially after Chelsea went away to Arsenal, right? You know, I think one of the low points of this season was that Emirates performance, and I said, you know, Chelsea would go away to Forest on the final day needing to win and be able to put in a performance like they have today. I don't think many of us would have logically turned around and said to you, there's any evidence to show that that would have happened. I mean, even before today, based on our away record, there wasn't much evidence to show away from home we could do it. But now we have. I just hope it becomes more of a consistent thing. A bit like the home record improving, a bit like winning big games improving. You hope these things are evidence to the players, to the coach, to the club, that they can become more of a, you know, a regularity rather than an anomaly, which unfortunately they have been for far too long. So yeah, we're going to turn our attention very quickly, as you'd suspect, from tomorrow to the Europa Conference League final. And I hope the players aren't celebrating too much tonight, because I would like to see that level of seriousness and elite mentality and kind of focus and game plan from Maresca in the same level, to the same extent, on Wednesday night in Wroclaw. Because many of us are going out there and we'd like to see us lift the trophy, but undeniably today Chelsea have got over the line. They've secured what for me was kind of essential for this season, and that was Champions League qualification. We have no idea what happens beyond getting this Champions League qualification, but I would like to think all the build up to the game, we've spoken about sliding doors moments, and you know, that sliding doors moment in 2003 when Jesper Grønkjær became a Chelsea hero, a folklore, in Chelsea folklore, that goal he scored against Liverpool, and kind of a sliding doors moment in our history. And although we knew today, if it went wrong, wasn't going to be as apocalyptic as it could have been in 2003, I think why many people have bigged up this game, rightly so, is because of what it could mean for the project, what it could mean for Chelsea, showing ambition and showing seriousness, and actually validating to kind of Chelsea fans in general that this is going in a positive direction. Because I don't think you can ever blame people over the last few years actually for doubting that, because the evidence in front of their eyes has not been there. Today, when you start winning games like this, when you beat Liverpool, when you actually, if you win a trophy, that's when people will start to have evidence and will start to have memories as well. That's a big thing as a fan, memories, right? Joyous memories. Those things stick in your mind for a long period of time. Memorable goals that you remember, and memorable days when you have big wins, and fans in that away end will remember that away end, I'm sure, for a long period of time, and will want more of those. So that, you saw Bowley on the pitch at full time, you saw Barley on the pitch at full time, you saw the sporting directors. That sporting director duo are going to be essential as to whether this high point, this success this season, actually is built upon to become more serious next year. Those are the two that I think are essential now, because if they can't turn around what they have done in recent windows, then I fear we may be sat here again, probably just challenging for Champions League qualification and sort of biting our nails, unfortunately. I hope it isn't like that. And that's, I think, the hope of many of us. So those are my thoughts today. In terms of man of the match, I think you got to go Levi, right? Cobham boy scores a huge goal, defensively immense. But there are so many names on this team sheet that I look at and just, Maresca deserves a lot of credit for his, tactical approach and getting it right today. And hopefully the start of many more positive days, and we end the 24-25 Premier League season fourth, so actually a position higher than I predicted, and two more than last season, which objectively, and we talk about objective reality a lot on this show, is better than last year. And Chelsea finally are beginning to move forward back in the Champions League. We're going to be hearing that famous anthem at the Bridge next season, and I can't wait. So thank you for watching, for listening. Follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea. Have a great rest of your bank holiday weekend, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.